I don't see weaknesses as deficits. I see them as opportunities for the individual to either augment their skills or supplement the team.
In this episode, we meet Dr. Gregory Desrosiers, an accomplished engineer and entrepreneur whose groundbreaking work in energy management technology could redefine efficiency on a large scale.
Those that want to be their own boss because they don't want to work a lot, they quickly realize that that's not the case. You are wearing a lot of hats, and it is all on you. You are the business. It's fun and it's rewarding. For many years, it's rewarding because it's how you perceive those challenges. I perceive challenges as opportunities. I applied for the PhD program at Drexel University. I was not accepted. It was very humbling. It isn't always roses, right? When you're positioning yourself, you want to position yourself in the greatest light, but you need to be real.
Every innovation starts with a bold idea and the courage to pursue it. I'm Alex Ponce. In this episode, we meet Dr. Gregory Desrosiers, an accomplished engineer and entrepreneur whose groundbreaking work in energy management technology could redefine efficiency on a large scale. From fine-tuning consumption in sprawling malls to mentoring the next generation, Dr. Desrosiers brings an inspiring mix of technical expertise, entrepreneurial spirit, and a commitment to meaningful change. So, good morning, Dr. Gregory Desrosiers. How are you?
Wonderful, Alex. Thank you very much. Doing good.
Thank you for joining me here. At the Pulse, we like to learn as much as we can from the guests, hoping that we can impart some of this knowledge to the students that are the primary audience of this show. So, I was hoping you could tell me about your current position, that you're at Smart Grid.
Smart Grid Ventures.
Smart Grid Ventures, and you're the COO?
Yes.
And I'd love to hear your take on the company. I'm sure it's very positive. And what makes it exciting for you? And what exactly is it that you do on a day-to-day basis?
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. No, happy to give a little bit of a background about myself. So yeah, I'm presently the Chief Operating Officer at the Smart Grid Ventures. We're a small company, happen to be a woman-owned organization. My wife is actually the president and CEO of our company.
That's great.
And we work primarily in the utility space. Mm-hmm. So we're more of a B2B organization.
Okay.
Where we focus on IT implementations. Okay. Various IT implementations. So, for instance, if you could think of the local electric utility. Mm-hmm. Here in the area, it would be Florida Power and Light, right, for instance. So, if they are upgrading their billing system or they're changing out their metering system, mm-hmm. We would support them in their implementation of that from not only a project management standpoint, but from a testing and ultimately integration standpoint, because there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes, and that's where really, our people, the people at Smart Grid Ventures, they are experts. Mm-hmm. They're experts in this, and that's really what we do. And we're very blessed to have wonderful customers, right? And equally, just a fantastic team, team that supports those customers, mm-hmm. and that's what's kept us going for. I guess it'll be 10 years here soon. Yeah.
That's very impressive.
It's been pretty good. Thank you.
So tell me, as a CEO, what do you do? What does a typical week look like for you?
Well, when you start and run sort of your own small business, mm-hmm. it's you really do a lot of things. When you have a small organization, you may give yourself a title, But what you really find is that, especially when you're starting off, you're doing multiple roles. But you give yourself a title so you have something you can put on the business card so that people can try to relate to where you are in the hierarchy. So from a chief operating officer standpoint, really responsible for the smooth operation of the organization, everything from all the back-end processes of payroll, human resources, retirement savings, like anything that we offer, healthcare for our company, to also the efficient processes that we need to have in order to have meetings, work with clients, the sales funnel. So basically, it's making sure that the organization runs smoothly, and those processes are all in place and continuing.
So lots of meetings, lots of phone calls, lots of emails, lots of headaches.
Well, the headaches are challenges.
Okay.
All right. Headaches aren't headaches.
Okay.
Headaches is you make them headaches.
They're challenges to overcome.
They're wonderful. They're challenges, and challenges are always opportunities.
That is true.
And that's how at least I like to look at them. But yes, there is a lot of meetings, especially when you're supporting the client. You're always in either a status meeting, an update meeting, a troubleshooting meeting, maybe, or explaining the issues that you may have found. So those are things that the team gets involved with. I've been very lucky in that the team that we have is highly experienced, and they are relatively self-sufficient.
Okay.
So that's been very nice. That just goes to show that not only their expertise, but the processes that we've been able to develop allow them to be empowered in order to represent the organization and solve the customer's problems. So what that allows me to do is to start working on some future growth, for our organization. So that allows me to explore some of those things, leveraging the research that I've done, as well as new research that I'm working on to ultimately help our clients. But it's something that now I can spend a little more time doing some of that, as opposed to running those status meetings or doing the troubleshooting calls.
So when you say research, are you meaning you've put on your engineering hat and you're trying to figure out some sort of technical way of dealing with it? Or is it like implementation? Because I know that's always its own thing.
Research could span any of those, of course. It could be of a technical focus. I happen to have an engineering degree, but right now it's more on the management side.
Okay.
It's the people side. It's what problems is our industry running into, and really getting to the root cause of what that is, as opposed to the symptom. Right, a lot of individuals believe they have found the root cause, and it turns out being a symptom. Right, and so when you apply a solution to a symptom, you're not solving the problem.
Right.
So part of what the research and some of the discussions and the things that you really dig into are, what is the root cause problem? And then what are some of the best ways in order to address it? Now, ultimately, because we are, consulting to our clients, you provide them with these options.
Okay.
Saying, okay, here is what the root cause appears to be. Here are the ways in which we can solve this together, or, you can go about solving this. And here's the evidence that this is, in fact, the problem. You fix this, symptoms go away, and you on to the next root cause problem.
That sounds like a great solution, because oftentimes when I deal with tech companies, there's always a solution for every issue that the customer wants addressed. But then after a few years, there are new solutions. And then it's like the ever-evolving sale that never ends, because just as you're almost complete implementing the first solution, now there's a new solution that has to go in place. And so it never ends.
You're absolutely right. And certainly not to diminish the good work that those in the IT and the technical roles do. But when you're dealing with a technical problem, a software problem, a bug in code, things like that, they are challenging to get to, and they're hard. But when you're dealing with a human and the multi-dimensional nature of just the human mentality, the emotions, the different personality types, you have an equally challenging issue, especially when you are running. It doesn't really matter what size the organization is. If it's 5 people or 500 or 5,000 or 50,000, you have just more of these opportunities for humans to interact, and there are challenges that come about that are just as challenging as some of those technical ones, and sometimes a little harder to put your finger on and see what's going on.
Well, it's funny because the I call them the STEM fields, those that are highly technical. You would think that because of the analytical nature of what they're doing, where it's not very subjective or creative in the traditional sense, it's very exact, it's very precise. Emotions are even higher because of the certainty with which the individuals that are dealing with it are saying, no, I know what I'm talking about. This is exactly what it is. And the other side is like, no, I'm also technical and it's this other, and they entrench. And all of a sudden, and kind of the cooler heads prevail.
Well, that and exactly in that wonderful scenario, and I'm sure both of those sides have excellent data to support their positions. But now it's those softer skills that are sometimes come a bit natural, but can also be learned in order to, how do you then move through that? And that sometimes takes, or again, calmer heads to prevail. That you might need. That's why we have management, supervisors, things like that, to help those challenges that might come up in an organization, and then help, of course, coach those individuals to appreciate the perspective of others. And again, it's not that it's a perspective, because they would be saying, well, here I've got the hard data here. Like this is the probability of this is X, and here's the data, and like this is it. This isn't random chance. All right, this isn't me rolling the dice. Right. I can prove that this is what's happening. All right, that's excellent. All right, but now presenting that. Sort of, pitching that idea. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a pitch per se, but selling those ideas. There is still an aspect of those sales or social skills, even for those that are involved in the STEM roles, to help explain to others that might not have that same analytical mind, in order to see, okay, I understand that perspective. And they don't need to understand all the math, but just maybe how it's presented can change the perspective of the person that you're talking to.
So the individual needs to have some storytelling abilities, public speaking abilities, these things that just go together, because I know that when I'm most impressed by highly technical individuals, it's when they're able to reduce the concepts to very simple 2 sentences, something that's, okay, that's what's going on. The electricity's not flowing the right way and we need to reroute it. Okay, got it. It's much more complicated, but at least I get the gist of what's going on. And that always impresses me, when someone is able to reduce complex concepts into simplistic ones. So you mentioned soft skills and your team, which is highly functional, so much so that they're independent. I mean, they set and forget, just talk to this client.
I like to think so. Yes, they are.
What skills do you think were developed on site, or do you feel that these individuals just already came highly qualified up front and they just were a good MVP team?
Right. We certainly have a mix of that. When we started our organization and we started to bring on employees, you work with your network, right? So the people that I brought in are people that I had worked with for however many years it was up to that point, 10, 12 years. And these were people, similar mentality, similar age, some, a handful of years older. So they've had that experience already of working in corporate America, and we're still working in corporate America. But they've sort of had those 10, 15 years of experience for when we started. So we were lucky to start with a very highly skilled team to begin with, primarily project managers, software testers, things like that. People who understood the industry, understood the softwares that we were dealing with, and already had some of those skills. Of course, everyone varies.
Sure.
Right? Everyone's got their unique personalities. And then as we started to grow, we were able to bring on fresh graduates.
Okay.
Right. And this was wonderful, right? Because now you have someone who's starting their career and are starting to develop some of those skills. And so it's allowed our team to truly act as a team and help coach and mentor those that have come in, because we all recognize this is our next generation that we want to start sharing what our industry is about, how we go about solving problems, how to sort of maybe think analytically, how to then present data differently, how to leverage tools that are out there right now, such as the artificial intelligence getting a lot of buzz and a lot of talk time right now.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah,
in a
well,
minute. We'll talk about that.
Everyone likes to talk about that. Yeah, it's great. It's a wonderful tool when used appropriately.
Right.
And so we encourage using those tools appropriately. And of course, they bring a lot of skills and a lot of perspective that, you've been working for 25, 30 years. You're very focused on the career. Perhaps you're starting, or your family's continuing the kids are growing up. And now you have someone who's coming in who is in their 20s, and they're able to bring not only their technical skills, but some of their social skills and some of the things that generation might be able to do faster, better, differently, all right, than we've been doing things for 20 years.
So
they look at things differently.
So it sounds to me like your corporate culture, among the many character traits it has, adaptability is one of them.
I think adaptability for any entrepreneur or any business is critical, right? You need to adapt to the changing environments, be open to that adaptation. And it's absolutely, as well as grit, right? To continue to push forward. It's how you pick yourself up after you've been knocked down. Now, everyone says that, right? Oh, knock yourself up, move forward. It is very hard. And to actually do that in practice is challenging, right? It's that determination backed with data, right? Sometimes there are lost causes and you just got to cut your losses, right? But if you have that grit, you have that determination, you're pushing forward, plus the ability to adapt and shift, then yes, the teams will be successful, the clients will be successful, and ultimately your organization will be successful.
Well, tell me about this resilience in practice. Take me to the beginning.
Okay.
No one is born a CEO.
Correct.
Unless you're a highly unusual baby. but no one's born a CEO.
And no one's born a doctor.
No one's born a doctor
either, yeah.
So tell me about your first experience in the business world.
Sure.
The floor is yours.
Well, the first experience could go back to when I was working in the kitchen at Miners Bay Lodge in Ontario. But that's way back when, paper routes and stuff. But after I got my engineering degree, from the University of Manitoba, I got my engineering degree in geological engineering. And I was lucky enough to, I have my bachelor's degree is in geological engineering. I focused on geophysics. Okay. So the study of electrical properties.
Especially when the magma is heated.
Well, electrical properties in the ground, either for environmental surveys or oil and gas exploration.
Okay.
And so oil and gas exploration is the area that I leaned.
Okay.
And got a job out of university working for an oil field services company, a rather large oil field services company with a lot of history and tradition. Schlumberger is who I worked for, and started working in the oil fields in the panhandle of Oklahoma. Absolutely loved it. Some of my greatest memories are going back to thinking about the times that I spent on the rigs, driving around with the crew, setting up, swinging the sledgehammer, getting everything set up, because we did both cementing jobs and then fracking jobs in order to increase the productivity of those particular wells. Not just oil and gas wells.
Those are some dangerous jobs.
Well, yes, dangerous, but one of the safety is drilled into you when you're working there. Safety driving is one of the most dangerous things that we do today. Right? It's no matter what role you're in, driving is incredibly. So these things are drilled into you, right? Because it's important. You're right. Safety is number one. It's number one in any.
But it's just remarkably dangerous. Well, more so. I have when I worked in law, I never once, while I was writing an appellate brief, worry that I was going to die in front of my computer. And here we are dealing with explosive conditions.
Yes. Yeah. No. You're absolutely correct. There are conditions like that. One of the more fun wells that I got to work on.
A fun well.
Oh, absolutely. It was a helium well. Yeah, and right in the panhandle of Oklahoma.
I thought helium came from nuclear fusion as a byproduct.
There are
Really?
helium wells, absolutely.
Wow.
And same thing. I went there and I'm like, helium well? Wow, this was excellent. So it was one of the first jobs I did.
Okay.
It was really fun. I remember calling my fiance at the time, now wife, calling Donna and saying, I worked on a helium well yesterday.
It's so unusual, right?
It is. It's unusual. Anyway, so that started the career.
Okay.
So I was an oil field engineer in working for the Schlumberger division that did cementing and fracturing.
Okay.
From there, Schlumberger still is a very large organization. And at that time, they had different entities. And one of those entities dealt with electric, gas, and water metering.
Okay.
So they sold meters. They started getting work in, at the time, what was referred to as automated meter reading. So these were electric utilities, let's say, that wanted to change out their electromechanical meters and put in one of the first generation digital meters that would send the meter readings over a cellular, if you will, or a Wi-Fi, not Wi-Fi. They would send the meter readings over a wireless signal.
Okay.
Right. So Schlumberger started to get into that. And they had opportunities for engineers, oil field engineers. These jobs were posted like in any sort of a human resources thing. And so I saw that. Well, one of my early experiences was working as a co-op student for, at the time, Centragas Manitoba, now Manitoba Hydro, but it was Centragas. And Centragas is what put me through university, basically. But so I had this utility experience, having worked at the local gas utility, doing everything from meter reading to surveying. I mean, you name it. When you're a co-op student, you're learning. It was wonderful. I absolutely loved it. So when I saw this opportunity within Schlumberger, I jumped at it.
Of course.
And I was successful. And they started putting me into sort of junior project management roles for these automated meter reading projects.
How many people were in your teams?
Well, they all start off relatively small, maybe 5.
Okay.
And then they start to grow, right, to maybe 20 or so, in one particular project in Philadelphia. We started our own building. The building's, we were renting a building. That location is still there, and supporting that client. They've since changed out and gone to the next generation.
Did they have a training program for you?
The only
because it sounds like they just threw you. It sounds like they just threw you 5 people and said go.
Oh no! Each of the I was definitely the youngest member of the team.
Okay.
Right. So for that particular project that I'm referring to, there were a few, but the one that I'll refer to is the one that moved me to Philadelphia. And that particular project, when it started, was one of the first of its kind, where the Philadelphia Electric Company, PECO, made that decision in around 1998, 1999, that they were going to, on their own, right, change out their meters, right? This is before there was any type of government incentive to do these things. So they made that decision. The team that was put together were very, very experienced individuals from Schlumberger primarily, and then this other organization that we had partnered with at the time. Cellnet was the name.
Okay.
Cellnet has since changed hands.
I love the names they give these companies.
Yeah, no, they're wonderful. It was great, and it was a wonderful team. It still is, and some of those people are excellent. The company has since evolved, and it's different names, etc., different changed hands as we see. But either way, this team that started was very seasoned. All right, very seasoned individual. So I was very lucky to start in the industry of automated metering back in the late 90s when it was sort of taking off, you could say. So that the team was very experienced. I was probably the most junior, but the training that they provided me was really the fundamentals of project management, right? Because I would go and they would be talking about project resources, all right? And I was still thinking about resources, like resources in the ground, like how much oil and gas are we talking about? Sure. So I was sitting there in the meetings and why are we talking about resources? Still thinking in the oil and gas days. And of course, it's like, no, Greg, resources are like people. Right. So we call them resources. So yeah, human resources. Oh, okay. I guess that makes sense. Either way. So I was learning project management. I was learning how to do schedules, how to do appropriate planning, how to figure out your critical path, those kind of things. Things that I didn't, you weren't really exposed to.
Right.
So they did provide a lot of training there. So then working with this team of experienced people, we put together this wonderful schedule that they did use for that first project and finished ahead of schedule, under budget. It was a multi-year project. I mean, this wasn't just a 3, 4, 5 month effort. This was a 3, 4, 5 year effort.
Right. What were the being in a personnel situation where you're a leader? What were the issues or challenges that you saw were repeat offenders, things that would constantly come up? Because I understand, for example, if you're trying to combine two different teams, you're going to have conflicts, if there's a slight cultural difference between the two. But once you've established a team, for the most part, norms are in place to kind of keep everything kind of stabilized inside. But every team is going to have problems that continue. What were the ones that you remember from back then that were
for that project?
The things that kept coming up.
There's always been things that come up. This was a first. Like the project that we were doing was a first. I don't want to say no one was doing this, but the volume at which we were changing out. I mean, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think it was like 1.2 million meters or 1.4 million, something like that. It was
and to be clear, number. We're talking about these old school meters that were almost like mechanical clocks.
Yes.
And you taking them out and you're replacing them with a new digital device. Which I guess has some sort of transmitter in it.
Correct. And this is back in like 1999.
So this wasn't even the kind that connect to like a WhisperNet type thing. This is the kind where it sends out a signal where you have to kind of get close enough to it.
Those are drive-by systems. This was one of the first fixed network systems. So we were also installing pole top devices that could hear these meters.
Same thing.
We actually created a mesh or a grid or something along those lines.
Okay.
Yeah, to hear them. But it wasn't Bluetooth. It wasn't Wi-Fi. It was not those technologies.
What was
it was a proprietary.
I was going to say it's a proprietary system, but it's basically the antecedent to what not the antecedent, but what came to be what we know today as part of the average mesh network, which we see everywhere.
The average mesh network, that's correct. And each of the vendors that now offers this have their own strengths. Right, that particular system uses our 900 megahertz, which is like your portable phones, portable phones we'd have at home. And there are others that own their own spectrum, very similar to a cellular organization, and lease the spectrum out. So there's different business models that these companies are now using. But the problems that we were running into that would repeat themselves. I'm having a hard time thinking back back to the problems because again, I was still in a very early role, but it would be.
Well, that's what I'm saying, personnel wise, because I mean, you're here a new leader, a young leader. You now have a group of people that your job is just to accomplish the goal that's been set out for you. But now you're interacting with them beyond technical. Now you're human to human.
I think the greatest learnings I had back then from a human resource perspective were the different groups, even within an organization, that were involved. Not just technical groups, but you had consultants and the role that the consultants played. You of course had the teams that had the items that needed to be either addressed or that needed to act on. And then of course you had the client. And so, tensions would arise when there were differences, right, between perhaps what the client wanted and what the technology was able to do.
Okay.
So I was, again, very lucky and blessed to see how some of these very skilled managers, leaders really, that I was working under, how they navigated that with the client and found compromise, told the stories of the technology, made it seem, not as impossible, but, here's where we are with the technology now. Here's what can be delivered. And here's how it's very similar to what you're looking for. It's not exact. So acknowledging that it's not meeting the full desire of what the client has, but starting to point out the things that it is meeting.
Okay.
So to try to get that compromise to determine, can we live with this?
Okay.
And it's not even a can we live with this, but it's showing how we're working towards that. And we agree with the end goal. Not there yet.
So the
conflicts, continue the partnerships.
So the conflicts seem, from what you're mentioning, imply that the majority of the conflicts were really customer based, expectation versus reality.
Well, there could also be within the organization. I know that we had a particular deployment schedule that we needed to meet for these pole top devices, for instance, and we also had teams that were working on changing the meters out.
Right.
And there, at the time, it was a sin for the meter deployment to get ahead of the RF network, because you didn't want these meters, which only transmit right wirelessly, to get where there was no network.
Well, that makes sense.
Right. Well, sometimes just inventory issues, ordering, various delays. The RF equipment wasn't ready yet, or maybe it wasn't commissioned, or maybe it was there, but the T1 connection, the internet connection, wasn't up and running yet. But we can't slow down the meter deployment. So then so that caused tension, because both teams needed to, that's an example of within the organization, while trying to, of course, work with the client because they want to get these meters changed out.
Right.
But that might not be the best technical thing to do. So there was one example.
It sounded like there were primarily externalities that were the source of the conflict. Because it sounds like your teams were working just fine if you can't even think of one.
Well, it was a great project. It was a great project, and it went really well. Of course, there were bumps along the way, but that was one example that I remember very clearly, because the meter deployment did need to get ahead of the RF mesh, and that caused some problems initially. But it also created an opportunity for us to be creative and have that ability if needed. It was the first time that, of course, we as a team had run into this, and it did cause problems, but we figured out workarounds, and we were able to then take that challenge that we ran into, which was a challenge, was a problem, and if needed, we were able to implement workarounds for when we ran into that scenario, if we ran into that scenario, a little bit down the road.
Now, how long were you at this particular company?
Schlumberger. I want to say 8 years.
Okay.
I think I was at Schlumberger for
so a significant amount of time.
Yes.
And then after that?
After that, there was another organization. So this was now after 9/11. So after 9/11, one of the learnings there was not being able to know where people were when they called 911. Okay, so when people called 911 at the time, your cellular phones, we didn't know where you were. You did not know it, and they weren't like the phones that we have today, which you've got your GPS coordinates and the whole bit. They weren't like that back.
The closest you could get to is what tower you were connected to, and that was basically it.
And so yes, correct. The closest tower you could connect to, but not a lot of companies at the time
were even keeping track of that.
Were keeping track of that, and certainly the people that answer the phone, the 911 phone call, or what they call the PSAP. I don't remember what the acronym stands for. Public Safety Answer Point. I don't remember. But when you call 911, the individual who answers that call, they're the ones that need to know where you are. So it was the coordination then between how do they get that information from the cellular providers, so that when someone calls 911, they know where you are within meters, feet. Within feet, meters, whatever. Really close. So this is back right after 9/11. There was an organization in the same area, the Philadelphia area, that had a technology that used the signal from multiple towers, and they were able to trilaterate where you were. Not triangulate, but this is the engineer coming out in me. It was trilateration. So they were able to figure out where you were based on the signal strength and the multiple towers that actually hear that cell signal, not just the one that you're talking through. So I transitioned over to that organization, or I moved over to that. There was an opportunity to take a project manager role and be responsible for some of these deployments for various cellular carriers. So at the time, I started with, I had the Southeast region for Singular Wireless.
I remember Singular.
So it was Singular Wireless before they merged with AT&T. And so I had the Southeast region, and the way it worked is the PSAPs would sign up for the service, and then Singular Wireless had contracted with this company that I worked for, now owned by Liberty Media. At the time, they were called True Position. It might still be going by that. But either way, it was with True Position. And so Singular Wireless went with True Position's solution. And so when the PSAP started to sign up for these things, it was our sort of teams that would go and make sure that the towers had what they needed in order to do this trilateration, and then send the signals to the PSAP when they answered the call.
And what was your role with this company?
Oh, so my role, pardon me, I was the project manager.
Okay.
I started as project manager, was then got promoted to program manager.
Okay.
For the whole Singular Wireless account, and then after that, so that was really the transition there. There were some changes that occurred at True Position, and some people had left a bit earlier and went to Comcast, whose headquarters are in downtown Philadelphia. So all this is happening in the Philadelphia area.
It does feel that way.
Yeah, it was. It absolutely did. And so some of those people had moved to Comcast and reached out and said, Greg, we've worked with you before, and there's some opportunities here at Comcast. And, would you consider coming over here? I said, well, it's no harm in talking. And so an opportunity presented itself at Comcast. And of course, a wonderful organization, absolutely wonderful organization. They were still in the old building when I moved over to Comcast. They hadn't yet built the first building that they have downtown. And there's a second building in downtown Philadelphia. So I was in their old building, right in the center of downtown Philadelphia. And so I went over there as a project manager also, but I was in the product group.
Okay.
So I was, the title shifted over time, but I was responsible at that time. Comcast was looking to deploy wireless service, as well as all the other, the internet and set-top boxes. It was an early introduction of wireless service. that's what really brought me to Comcast.
And how many people were, in effect, under you during your time at Comcast?
So when you're in a product type role, or at least the way it was originally structured, even in those roles, I was in some of those earlier roles, I didn't have any direct reports.
Okay.
All right. Didn't have any direct reports when I was in the role at Comcast. At True Position, of course, there was
you needed the team.
I became the manager of my colleagues that I had been working side by side. I was now the manager.
Mm-hmm.
So, but Comcast was a product role, and then they brought me in because of the wireless background and the project management skills, and of course the network that helped bring me in there. And then I moved into some other products that they were offering, their business voice over IP service, right? I was at Comcast for a little while, but then an old manager gave me a phone call. And it was when I was at Comcast that I did my master's degree at Drexel University.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of my old managers who was part of the original wireless projects, and called me up, knew that I was graduating, and said, Greg, the automated metering market is heating up again. I was like, really? Because I've been focused on learning IT and databases and all the fun stuff that I learned at Comcast, and managing product teams and engineering teams. They said, yeah, no, it's coming up, and we've got a very large deployment with Southern Company was coming up. Would you consider coming back into this industry? So, well, of course. I mean, what's going on?
And just to be clear, you've maintained your relationships with all the companies, it seems, that you've dealt with, and good relationships, it seems like.
I would like to think so. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I try not to burn any bridges when we move on.
Well,
other roles.
One question I always ask individuals is, question that we often get is, if an employer can let you go in one day, why do you have to give them 2 weeks notice? And I mean, it's simplified because, some people get severance and other people get golden parachutes. And so the running theme has been, it's the right thing to do. But what's your opinion on that? And as far as bridge building versus bridge burning?
Right. I try to live by the motto of, I would like to treat others as I would like to be treated. Mm-hmm. So now in Smart Grid Ventures, in the event that someone wants to move on to another opportunity, first, one of the early lessons I learned from those leaders that I had worked for was always support your folks. Okay. So in the event that there is not an opportunity at your organization that fulfills them, and they have found something that fulfills them outside the organization, yes, it is sad to see them go, but it's also wonderful that they are moving on and they are getting challenged and they're fulfilling something that they want to do. And so we support that.
Okay.
All right. As much as it's sad to see them go, as I mentioned, but this is something that they are advancing in their career, and this should be celebrated. And as any manager or any leader, you want to support that, right? You want to support that. It's unfortunate that there isn't something here in the organization, but there's something that they want to be fulfilled. So I would like to be able to have an opportunity to communicate that to my clients so that we can work through that transition, because I'm sure that because of the people that we have are working on important projects for our clients. And so if someone wants to move on, you need some time. So the flip side of that is, in the event that I was moving on to another organization and I knew the roles that I was working in, I wanted to be able to give time, like a lot of time. So I in my career have always provided a lot of time acknowledgement, saying I am looking at this other opportunity.
Okay.
And then even when I'm interviewing for that role, indicating to them that I'm presently, managing the singular wireless account. Right. I'm going to need time before I transition over. And it was in that scenario, it was well known because the people that were talking to me were people that I had worked with. So they knew what I was doing at True Position. So it's important to communicate with both parties so that the one party who wants you appreciates that you are willing to give who you're leaving that time, because there may come a point where you are giving them the same amount of time. So it's how I want, it's how I would want to be treated. Same thing if the event that I was working for someone and they did not want to continue that relationship, I would like some notice, right? Not just a day, and I understand that there are, security concerns and things like that. So there needs to be some structure, but still, we are dealing with humans.
Right.
One of the first things we talked about when we talked about there's technical problems which are hard, but they're technical problems you can get through. When you're dealing with humans and emotions, there is another level that you need to consider, especially in that scenario where you're trying to let someone go. So there needs to be not just some compassion in it, of course, but part of the compassion is time.
Do you feel that self-awareness is a key component of your work, in the sense that you need to know yourself? These individuals need to know themselves. You have to know how they operate. They have to know how you operate. There has to be a full understanding, because oftentimes I see individuals that there's like a cognitive dissonance. They're always saying, "Oh, I'm the nicest guy. I'm so patient." And then you look at the track record and the actions don't match the words.
Right.
And I'm being generous here, because I know individuals too that are like, "I would never do that." And they're the same people you hear in horror stories throwing staplers across a room. And so it's one of those where you're trying to figure out the difference of the two. So do you find that working on yourself is important? Because your education definitely speaks to the fact that you're open to working on yourself. I mean, bachelor's, a master's, and forget the doctorate, because that is, you would think that's the summit, but you're like, I still want to do more. And you have graduate certificates, Wharton, Harvard. I mean, it's impressive.
Thank you.
How do you feel about the act of being self-aware and working on yourself?
I think being self-aware is very important, and it sort of falls into that a little bit of that emotional intelligence camp of being not only understanding your emotions, but understanding yourself, understanding your strengths, understanding the areas where you can improve, and really just being honest with yourself, and that's difficult for many, right? You want to portray. You want to portray yourself as the professional, sometimes as the expert, But when that inward look, that self-reflection of, okay, where are the areas where I can improve? Where are the areas where I'm strong? And I can now share that knowledge with others, right? So that I can share my lessons, share my learnings to help others that might be working on those skills. At the same time, where can I seek assistance with those that have strengths in areas that I might not have, right? Or I want to shore them up a little bit. Or if I don't have time to shore them up, who can I bring onto the team that shores up those strengths?
Okay, so you don't see
or those weaknesses.
Oh no, weaknesses.
Sorry.
So it sounds to me like you don't see deficits and weaknesses as a weakness so much as an opportunity for it to be compensated by somebody else.
Well, like we mentioned a little bit earlier, I mentioned a little bit earlier, any challenge, be it a technical challenge that you're looking to overcome on a project or a challenge within yourself, is an opportunity. So how you move forward with that opportunity is up to you, right? And there are different ways you can do it. If it's something where you are perhaps needing to assume a particular role, and it requires whatever the skill set is that you need some improvement, it might be worth spending some time on shoring that up.
Okay.
At the same time, if you're building a team of people that you need to lead for whatever reasons, and if you might be more artistic, or you're the details aren't something that, first you need to realize that the details are something that it's something you don't spend your time on. right? You're more the visionary type leader.
Okay.
Then augmenting the team, if it's in an environment where you're able to augment the team, bring someone in who has those is a detail-oriented individual or is into time management.
So the Tim Cook to Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
Basically the counterbalance. So what do you say
Yes,
to
the counterbalance.
So what do you say to someone that makes the joke? CEOs are great at giving great news, good news. Any bad news, give it to the CEO. They'll deal with the operations.
Yes. Well, that's not necessarily the case.
I would think so.
I guess it depends on
You
the
have good news to give,
organization.
you'll be the one to give.
Yeah, it's good news, bad. I think good news, bad news should come from the appropriate leadership team. But yes, I mean it's and of course it depends on the organization.
Of
right?
course.
But yeah, I don't see weaknesses as deficits. I see them as opportunities for the individual to either augment their skills or supplement the team.
So talking about a team, up to now, you've talked about your positions, as they say, working for the man, working for companies that have already been established.
Right.
And this moment happens to everyone, whether it happens at the beginning of the journey or at the end, where they're like, I never want to work for someone versus I've worked with other people and now I want to work for myself.
Right.
At some point you transitioned. At some point you decided, I can do this and I can do this for myself. And I want to be the one making the decisions and sitting at the table. So tell me about that experience going entrepreneur.
Sure. It did start relatively early, to be quite honest. So when I started in the oil field, this was back in 97, 98, the price of oil wasn't very high at the time. And so I was this new, fresh out, engineer working in the oil field, and things weren't looking very good. So there were people that I was working with that had been in the industry for 20, 30 years, and they were concerned about losing their role. This is when I was in Oklahoma, right? They were concerned about losing their roles. And then here I am, haven't been there for 6 months, and I'm equally concerned of, my goodness, like I might not have this position. I'm looking at these other individuals who've been here forever, and they're just as concerned as I am. That was probably one of the sparks that brought in the, I want to make sure that I have skills that I can diversify my skills. So I'm not just an oil field engineer. So when the opportunity came up to do project management, I figured that's a transferable skill. And it happened to be in the electric utility industry. And I'm like, well, I used to be a co-op student at the gas company, and I know about metering and gas metering and the whole bit. So still within an organization though, the move to start diversifying my skills in order to be self-dependent in navigating my career. So then you fast forward through the various roles I've had, still working with organizations. There have been downsizing. There were changes in leadership, decisions that were made where I certainly wasn't part of the room where the decisions were being made. And then similarly, working for clients, right? Working for a client, maybe the electric utility industry, and seeing how they may have handled certain layoffs. It really got me thinking along the same lines of, I want to be in control of my own destiny here. And I continued, unfortunately perhaps, continued to have that opinion that, organizations were needing to make the decisions they needed to make, but it was still impacting these individuals. And perhaps I didn't necessarily agree with the way in which it was being handled. So I started having, talks with Dawn, and she was thinking similarly.
This is your wife.
This is my wife. Yeah, I started talking with my wife, and so we were thinking along the same lines. And I had the MBA, right? So I had some of the backing and some of the business knowledge and all those things that you learn when you do your master's degree. And I said, not only do I think I can provide a service, but I want to look after our people. Like, one, I want to look after us, right? Us, the family and the kids and the whole bit, because we were starting our family. But I also want to, I want to look after our people as best as I can, right? As best as we can. Give notice, treat them appropriately, treat people how you want to be treated, compensate them well, all that kind of stuff, provide those benefits. So I wasn't as sold on being an employee for an organization. I wanted to chart my own course. And I figured, well, we will start the organization together, and I will be employee number one, and let's see where this goes.
Well, right? How many were there when you started? It was you and
your
wife?
It was just Donna and I. Yeah. So my wife handled, of course, all the financials and things like that, because she's good with that. She's got a very good handle on the finances and where we want the organization to go, things like that, as do I, of course. But I was also the one that had sort of the contacts in the electric utility industry. And so I started working in that capacity as a contractor, as a contract project manager. And then started to sort of grow organically that way. We didn't seek any, venture capital funding or anything along those lines. We grew through our network.
Okay.
We grew through our network. And then won various work to do various projects. And started to build the team with people that I knew from the network. But what really drove me there was wanting to chart my course, right? I didn't feel like I could trust corporate America to help me get where I wanted to go, and so I will take charge, and I will chart my own course, and I will do as best as I can.
No, that is the story of many companies.
Well, and at the same time, I was confident in my skills, right, to not only do a good job, but also grow the organization. But in the event that tragedy happened and things didn't work out, again, I was confident in my skills. I felt like I could always fall back if needed to a position within an organization. Not desirable, right. But that was always still there because I had the skills that I had developed through working, for however many years before I left. You learn all the skills, exactly. So while there's certainly risk, there is certainly risk when you go out on your own. I was very confident in my abilities, but also knew that worst case scenario, I could go back if needed, because of the relationships and the network, and of course, just the skills.
Just this weekend, I was in Cambridge, and I heard from a gentleman who runs a major private equity firm, and he was talking about his earlier days, and one project in particular, he had set it up in such a way where he was basically consuming his savings for a good 9 months before it was going to be showtime. And once it was showtime, plus 2 weeks, primary investor bailed.
Oh, boy.
And he had $18 in his bank account. He had just gotten his first check, but I don't think he had cashed it yet. And now that project is dead. And so he had to find, of course, alternative funding and whatnot. When you went out on a limb, because I don't care how prepared you are, starting your own venture is going out on a limb. Did you prepare yourself or anticipate the financial drain that would create? Or was it a situation where you were comfortable enough that it was a non-issue, you didn't have to think about it?
The finances are always
a concern.
Are always a concern. So we had a budget.
Without details.
We had a budget. We knew what we could. We knew what our run rate was. We had a young family. I mean, at the time as well, the kids were still in daycare. So we knew our costs, and the opportunity that I was working was enough that I was at least at par to where I was from a compensation standpoint. Perhaps a little bit more. When I say at par, the hourly rate was more, But you now have all these other costs when you become an entity, insurance requirements, things like that. Even if you're an employee of one, there's still costs, right? So I at least had an opportunity where, while the hourly rate looks like it's a lot more, right? Because it is, and number wise, it is a lot more.
Sure.
But there are other costs that you take on. So we financed all that out, or we budgeted it out, and knew how long we had, for this. And then again, just grew organically.
We always tell people, don't delude yourself that starting your own business is going to be easier. If anything, you've multiplied times 30 the amount of things you have to worry about and you have to deal with. So tell me about those early days. How many hats were you wearing? What were you concerned with? Tell me about those first hires that you were making.
Yeah, I presently have the pleasure of adjunct instructing at Florida Gulf Coast University on the other side of Florida, right on the west coast of Florida. And I happen to teach a class on finances in the School of Entrepreneurship.
Oh.
So a lot of the students that are in there are entrepreneurial majors and have that very desire in order to work for themselves. And that's wonderful. I want to fuel that passion for sort of being your own boss, etc. At the same time, need to provide some of the reality of what it really means to be your own boss, and what it, you're your own boss, but you still are working for individuals, your clients, your customers, or whatever it is that you're planning to do, and it is a lot of work, right? So those that want to be their own boss because they don't want to work a lot, they quickly realize that's not the case, right? Or perhaps they're not as successful, or maybe for whatever it is that they're doing, they're comfortable with that particular level of income, and they can live comfortably, and that's fine. But others that are looking to maybe advance and perhaps get a home, or whatever the case might be, you need to be pulling in some good money in order to finance those things. So the awareness of the finances that I'm teaching them, plus putting in the concept of, you are going to be working very hard. I'll bring from time to time other entrepreneurs to talk to the class, and they'll share very similar experiences. One joke just the other day that it was easier becoming an employee again for someone else. It was a lady that I was speaking to who owned her own salon for, I think she mentioned 30 years. And then when she sold her salon, she just went back to just cutting hair at one of the chain hair cutting places, and it was once the kids were out of school. So again, wherever she was in her life journey, kids were gone, the kids were out of school, sold the salon, and just cutting hair now. It's easier.
I hear that from a lot of physicians and a lot of lawyers that, they work for a major firm or a hospital. They hated how they were treated, or how they were compensated, or the policies or the protocols in place. They're like, we're going to do it better. So they end up going to private practice. Then they start having to deal with insurance. Then they have to deal with administration. There is nobody in accounting. They are accounting. There is no one in human resources. You are human resources. And they start realizing, life was easier over there because of the few things I'm personally responsible for. I'm just an individual contributor over there. And half the time they'll stay, and the other half they'll go back.
Right.
And in your case, you stayed and you kept growing.
We kept growing, and again, in the same discussions with these students, point those things out. So one of the things that we teach in this particular class, because we're teaching finances, as I mentioned, we use an online software bookkeeping tool, QuickBooks. So throughout the term, we have this fictitious company, their fictitious company, that we're doing all these entries into QuickBooks to sort of to show them here's how you use this software in the event that you're going to go out on your own.
Right.
And I tell them about this. In the beginning, when we started, it was an Excel spreadsheet, right?
It still is for a lot of people.
Well, so it was an Excel spreadsheet, and then we needed to migrate to QuickBooks. All right, and then it came from me doing the QuickBooks or Donna doing the QuickBooks entries to now having help right, from a bookkeeping firm that is able to keep up with our QuickBooks and keep it synchronized and reconciled every month.
Well, QuickBooks makes it kind of easy. That's like entry level for
right.
Well,
It is.
When it gets to the point where you have an in-house accountant, that's when you know that you're at a different level.
Right, exactly. So we're still contracting this.
Well, that's fine. Things. It works.
But yeah, so we do sprinkle some of that reality into the entrepreneur students because you are wearing a lot of hats, as you point out, and it is all on you, right? You are the business, and it's fun. It's fun and it's rewarding, right? In the beginning, right? For many years, it's rewarding because it's how you it's how you perceive those challenges. Because it's rewarding, but that's because I perceive challenges as opportunities. Right. So I welcome them because when they present themselves, it's an opportunity. So we work through these things. It can get tiring. So that's where the grit comes in order to keep pushing through this, right? In order to, because you are moving forward. It's now your organization. The other mental shift that I sort of hint at to these to the students that are in their bachelor's program is I ask them, why do you want to become an entrepreneur? And a lot of the reasons are, there's the social aspect, like the social entrepreneurship aspect of helping the organization, helping the community, etc. But there's also being your own boss. So as we evolve in the class, I'm pointing out that as you grow your organization, you then, in fact, your organization is now an organization. Now, you need to attract people to work in your entity. The same type of entity that you didn't want to work for in the beginning of your career. So how does that work? Like, how are you going to attract people that are generally where you are now in your age to come, in fact, work for you? And it's a perplexing moment for some.
Sure.
But we help them through this, and that's why we also develop leadership skills. And some of the other, marketing and management, all those other kind of things, in order for them to be successful.
Well, it's a snake eating its own tail. Here it is full circle and what's going on. You have a doctorate degree.
I do.
From the lovely Florida International University.
Yes. Fantastic program.
Fantastic program.
Incredibly rigorous. But yes.
How has it influenced your leadership skills? Because most people kind of stop at an MBA. And you said, not good enough. I want to know how this clock works.
Right.
And of course, you probably see everything in a different light now that you've learned it at a different level. How has it influenced your life? How has it affected your leadership position with the company you are running?
Right. The reasons for me doing my doctorate was, I'll share a story of perhaps, sort of the grit and determination. But when I was finishing the MBA at Drexel University, I felt like I wanted more. Like I really wanted more. And so I started looking at the PhD programs. But at the same time, right, my engineering background, I wanted to solve problems, right? I'm problem solver. I like to think of myself that way because when we were working on all these software programs and coding and bug fixes and all these implementations, we were always solving issues. We were solving problems, and I enjoyed solving problems and working through them. So I was learning the MBA stuff, and this was excellent. I loved it. I wanted more. I wanted more because I wanted to solve issues that I saw in our industry or that customers, we were running into. So I started looking at the PhD, and started to learn that the focus of a PhD is a little more theoretical. So at the time, there wasn't a program. I didn't do a lot of research, but at the time, there wasn't an easy program available to me or a cost-effective program available to me to pursue that next level that really focused on what we would consider as applied research. All right, so fast forward many years, because then we started right after the MBA. A few years later, got back into the automated metering industry. Was in there for a while, and then started the company. And now you're growing the organization. So that consumed my time. Of course, right? It consumed my time. We moved to Southwest Florida in 2019. And the organization was doing well, and things were growing, and we were winning all these various projects. And so that desire for that, okay, can I be doing this better? Right? Can I be solving these issues better? How can I be applying the theories that are out there to help not only our company, but ultimately, our clients solve problems? And that's when I started looking at the doctoral programs again. And there was this relatively new program at Florida International University. I actually looked at starting it. I would have started in 2020, but various things occurred in the beginning of 2020.
Like that pesky COVID.
Yes, it was rather pesky. Just moved to the area, and of course, COVID occurred. We declared that here in the second week of March, and so things sort of changed. But it was right around that time where I had already attended one of the information sessions in late 2019, early 2020.
So it was already
I was
percolating.
I was looking at starting. I would have been perhaps cohort 3 or something along those lines. But either way, my focus became back to the organization, because now we were experiencing clients pulling back. I had employees that we needed to look after, and I took that very seriously. And so that was now the focus of keeping the company, keeping the organization moving while looking after our employees as best as I could. All right. When we got through that hurdle, I reheated this up for the same reasons. I wanted to learn how to use theory to fix problems, real problems.
Not just generic problems, but problems in your own company.
In the company, or being able to help clients with identifying the true root cause. So reheated this up, again, spoke to the wonderful people here at Florida International University, and was accepted into their DBA program, Doctor of Business Administration. And it's been wonderful, because I got more than I was expecting, absolutely more. Not only in the aspect of the education that I received on how to be an applied researcher, right? And what that means. Because one of the things that the program shares with you, a lot of us come into the program with many years of work experience, right? The program is designed for working leaders, if you will. So you've already got generally many years of work experience. So when you come into the program, you kind of don't quite know what to expect. But one of the things that the program shares with you is you bring such knowledge of your industry and your contexts, if you will, that take the traditional PhD students, takes them years to learn, because in a traditional approach, they haven't yet perhaps been in those experiences yet in corporate America.
Right.
And so they're trying to determine if some of the things that they're looking at are in fact issues or are in fact problems. Whereas we have issues that we're well aware of because we've lived them. We have the scars to prove it. And we're coming here to, how do I get to that next level? And so you learn that there's nothing we're going to be able to teach you about your industry. You are an expert in your industry already.
Mm-hmm.
We will show you how to apply theory. But let's start with, what is theory? And so you're challenged with learning some of the academic things. It comes quicker than you think. It comes quicker than you think. And then you're really shown, you're not shown, but you're exposed to, how do we then do applied research? How do you know that, one, you are in fact tackling the root cause?
Mm-hmm.
How do you know that it's the root cause and not just a symptom? And then how do you know that the approach that you're taking to then collect data is valid?
Mm-hmm.
How do you know that the questions that you're asking people, either in a quantitative style survey where they rate something from 1 to 5 and how much do you agree or disagree, or even in a qualitative perspective when you're doing interviews, how do you then take that data and know the information that it's telling you is statistically relevant and it isn't just random chance, to then come up with, here's what's happening, and here are the areas where if we focus on these things, the outcome will be, what we desire, whatever that might be. And so you learn that in the DBA, in this applied research. And we have a very rigorous program here at FIU where this isn't some, I used to joke, right? This isn't some certificate that you're getting, all right? This isn't some,
Which, don't get me wrong, graduate certificates from certain places and certain programs,
I agree,
are top of the line, but
Right.
there's a difference between a certificate and a degree.
Correct. You can't just,
Can't certificate your way through life.
you can't just sit in class and not do anything. Attendance in the room doesn't get you passing grades. It is hard work. It is very hard work.
But you know what? The doctorate messes you up, because when you read an article that says, referring to a study, eating chocolate every day will give you 20 extra years. Before I would just read and go, great, another competing article. Now I'll look up the study.
Yes.
I'll see how it was created. I'll see how what is the sample size? What are we talking about here?
Yep.
And that can get tiresome, because now you apply that in every single aspect.
You're almost doing your own research again. Yeah,
Exactly.
That's exactly right. You change the way you think.
Mm-hmm.
You change the way the program teaches you these skills, right? To be an applied researcher. And as part of that process of getting there, you start to look at things differently.
Mm-hmm.
You start to question things. Not that you suddenly become a pessimist, right? But you legitimately question your curiosity, perhaps. Oh, where did they get that? I'd like to see that data. Not because, again, you're being a pessimist or you're questioning, but you're legitimately interested in, well, how did they collect that information? Well, that's interesting. I wonder how they went about going through it. Now you can read those things and understand what it's saying. Whereas when you first start the program and you're reading some of the papers for the first time, it is English written on the paper, and I am a native English speaker. I read the English on these journal articles. I don't know what it said. Like in the beginning of the program, like, what did that just say? Fast forward, 3 years or so, I can now not only read them, but I can read them and I'm like, oh, I don't think, really? What made you think that? And flip to a couple of the sections because you know now where to jump to.
Exactly.
To look for certain things. And you're like, how did they do that? Oh, okay. What's their data again? And then you go to the appendix if you can find it. You get the appendix data or you download it and you're like, because you now know where to look. Like you're saying, you now know wwhere to look. And you're starting to look at some of those things. So at the same time, sometimes that's enjoyable, right, to do that. But usually if I'm doing something like that, it's because I'm wanting to share information. I'm wanting to share information with either some of these students that I have the absolute pleasure of working with now, or our clients, right, or our employees, and say, hey, did you know that, this particular study, which, came out recently, is thinking that this might be one of those contributing factors. Let's give this a try. Let's try this out.
Right.
So it changes the way you look at things, and it changes the way you question things, but ultimately you are adding value to either the organization that you're still working in, because you're helping them identify the true root cause, and you have a manner in which to go about it that is supported by a rigorous scientific process to truly vet out the issues, as opposed to winging it.
Which is what most people do.
Some people wing it. Now, there is something to be said with industry knowledge and sort of how we've done things. That's good to now, but look into that. Okay, how have we done things? What was the reason why we were doing this at that time? Are we sure that our customer segment is now the same? Things change. Technology changes. Are we sure that this information of decisions that we made from even 15 years ago is still valid in today's context, the people we're working with? Maybe it is. Maybe it needs to be quickly evaluated so that you can make some decisions.
As we wrap up, I'm curious, because your background is so varied and you've had success after success, but it's very incremental, that success. Most people go in fits, they get this great position and then the next one they lose it. And then what has been the biggest challenge or challenges that you've experienced personally? I mean, we've had guests that have had alcohol addictions, drug addictions, divorces. They're on their fourth husband or wife. They couldn't hold a job for a long time, so they ended up going into entrepreneurship so that no one can fire them. And we've had situations where, we've heard, horrible things like they're estranged from their children because they would work late and weekends and holidays, and so they were never available. Now the children are 25 and they're practically like strangers. It happens. What has been your experience that you'd like to share of some of the downsides, and how have you coped with it? Because there's no way you could be a success and for you to be completely unscathed. I mean, that's just not possible.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. It's completely impossible. So of course it helps to have a good team at home, right? And so it's, I've been very, 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 very lucky that, my wife and I, Donna and I, we met in university, and I can legitimately say, right, she's my best friend. And so that's not just, words like that. I mean it. She runs the household.
It's being recorded right now, so you can't get away from it.
You can edit that out. But no, really, she runs the household. She helps run the organization. Of course, she runs the organization's finances. She approves all the financial stuff. So she's wonderful. So having that rock at home certainly was important and part of that success. Even deciding to go into the DBA program, that was a discussion.
That was a discussion.
Can
a 3-year commitment?
Not only with her, but with the client that I was supporting at the time too.
Okay.
Right, because the program requires you to take at least one Friday a month on site, and then you got your Tuesday, Thursday evenings where you're doing the Zoom sessions. At least that's the way it was when I did. I think it's very similar. And so, that I needed, to have to talk to the client a little bit about that. Say, hey, I'm looking at pursuing this. It might
that's interesting.
Might not be able to do 10 hours a day anymore.
I love that you checked with your client whether you should go back to school.
Well, it was more talking it through, because I was, of course, involved in something that was very important.
Your availability was affected.
Yeah, availability was affected. And again, I was independent, right? So it's my own business, right? So I'm not an employee of theirs. I am a consultant, and I want to maintain that relationship, but, sort of talk through how we would be able to work this out. And of course, I used several of them as references when I applied for the program too. I mean, so
it goes hand in
we
hand.
did all that stuff too. But some of the challenges that we've had, well, of course, some of those early experiences I shared, those were challenges, right? When new management came in at True Position, the relationship with Singular Wireless wasn't the best, or AT&T was the best. And that was one thing where I remember when this new vice president came in, wonderful individual, and she's since moved on. But I remember one of my first meetings with her, and she asked me in her meeting, why shouldn't I hold you accountable for this horrible relationship that we have with Singular?
What'd you
Aren't
say?
you the program manager?
What'd you say?
Well, quite honestly, I mean, I was still relatively new in my career, right? I'd only been working for whatever it was, maybe 9 years at the time. So still pretty new. I don't remember how I responded. I was certainly very uncomfortable. I remember, of course, the meeting, and I probably commented on, I probably acknowledged it, saying, yeah, that's certainly a position that can be taken. However, there were some things that were, whatever the guidance was at the time, something along those lines. I wasn't trying to point fingers or point blame. I acknowledged that, yes, I was absolutely part of the relationship. My goal was to try to make things better, but there were some things, here are some of the details in A, B, C, D that our organization at the time was not willing to move on, and I was the messenger there.
Right.
So that was a bit of a challenge there, and I was demoted. I was demoted in the True Position role from program manager back to a project manager. In parallel to this activity, I was getting that phone call from Comcast, as it so happened. It made moving easy.
Very easy.
All right. So yes, it isn't always roses, right?
Right.
When you're positioning yourself, of course, you want to position yourself in the greatest light, but you need to be real. Sort of like I'm being real with you now. Those were some of the challenges, but it was a fantastic learning. When I went to Comcast, I needed that time to heal because I was still a young manager, and it was crushing to be having been promoted to being responsible for that group, to then being demoted, quickly moved out of the organization after that on my own.
Right.
The good news was, and the conversation that I had not with the vice president, this new vice president that came in, but one of the consultants that they had brought in to do this work, was the gentleman said, we don't want to lose you, Greg. We see the value. So it was good, right? In how they were positioning it. We don't want to lose you, the knowledge that you bring, but we want to move you into this particular role, which was clearly a demotion. Here's the new org structure that we're putting out. And of course, I wasn't in one of those boxes, but they didn't want to lose me. So it was a fantastic learning experience. I did go to Comcast, which I used as a growth opportunity, but I was healing a little bit from that. Another setback I'll share with you. I shared earlier in this interview that I was interested in pursuing my PhD program, the PhD after my master's degree. Not that I suggest that any of you download my dissertation, but if you'd like to, in my acknowledgement section, I reveal there as well that, and I meant this, and I mean this to this day, with no sarcasm or no grain of salt. I meant this. I applied for the PhD program at Drexel University. I was not accepted.
It's humbling.
It was very humbling, and I, in the dissertation material, I did thank the Drexel University committee for that decision, because I realized, and again, knowing yourself, because I realized that my pragmatic, applied approach just didn't fit the PhD. It didn't fit the philosophy of a PhD. And when I interviewed with them, for the PhD program, and I talked about, and they asked, well, what do you want to do after you get the PhD? My answer was, I'm going to be right back in industry. I'm solving problems, all the things you've heard me talk about here. Like, I haven't changed, right? That's what I want to do. But they realized what I didn't, was that's not what a theoretical PhD program is about. Now, they didn't say that to me,
Sure.
but I got not accepted.
Right.
That was humbling. That took time to heal. But now, years later, and reflecting and having now been through FIU's applied research, incredibly rigorous program, not only do I now realize that was a difficult but excellent decision that Drexel made, because whether they verbalized it or not, I would have not been happy. I most likely would have not been happy with that, because it wouldn't have gelled. It wouldn't have gelled with me. I would have been learning more of the theoretical and not necessarily the applied. But either way, the rejection was there. And so, career took a slightly different trajectory, focused on family a little bit more, ended up starting the organization. So there have been some of these setbacks, but it didn't quelch my desire to get that additional knowledge. And in the story that I shared, it did take some time, and then, COVID hit and the organization, it never diminished my desire to get that additional knowledge, and then introduced to the FIU program. So, and then, it continued with all those things. So there have definitely been personal setbacks from the PhD rejection to, the challenge at True Position after there was that leadership change. But all of them have been learning. And upon reflection, I can understand the vice president's position.
Right.
Having a new vice president coming in, trying to understand, navigate the area. I can understand the need to make an org structure change now. I can understand the PhD rejection now upon reflection.
Right.
It doesn't feel good when you're living through it, but you push through.
So these were less setbacks and more like alignment moments, where someone else
like
seemed
that.
to know it better than you. And now you realize that was the best decision that ever happened.
Yes, had they presented it that way, that certainly would have been nice. But I like the way that I'm going to take that. I think that's the way I'll start thinking about it.
Well, with that, we'll leave it. Dr. Gregory Desrosiers.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you very much for coming over.
Excellent. Thank you.
For the very short drive.
Yes.
You practically flew over here, and I thank you for it. And that completes our episode.
Thank you very much.
And I know many, many people are going to be impacted by your words. So
I hope
appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Innovation begins with a spark and grows with determination. If you have an idea, take the leap. You never know how far it might take you. This episode is dedicated to the inventors and entrepreneurs who challenge the status quo and create solutions for a better tomorrow. I'm Alex Ponce. See you next time for more stories that inspire.